form of a Reeves theater. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sin or his parents' sin?
It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. This happened so the power of God could be seen in him. We must quickly carry out the task assigned us by the one who sent us. The night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world.
Then he spit on the ground and made mud with his saliva and spread the mud over the blind man's eyes.
Go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam.
So he went and washed and came back seeing. His neighbors and those who knew him as a blind beggar asked each other,
isn't this the man who used to sit and beg? Some said he was, and others said, no, he just looks like him. But the beggar kept saying,
yes, I am the one.
they asked, who healed you? What happened?
The man they called Jesus made mud and spread it over my eyes and told me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash yourself. So I went and washed, and now I can see.
Where is he now? They asked.
I don't know.
Then they took the man who had been blind to the Pharisees, because it was on the Sabbath that Jesus had made the mud and healed him. The Pharisees asked the man all about it, so he told them,
He put the mud over my eyes, and when I washed it away, I could see.
some of the Pharisees said,
this man Jesus is not from God, for he is working on the Sabbath.
others said, how could an ordinary sinner do such miraculous signs? So there was a deep division of opinion among them. Then the Pharisees again questioned the man who had been blind and demanded,
What's your opinion about this man who healed you?
I think he must be a prophet.
the Jewish leaders still refused to believe the man had been blind and could now see. So they called his parents. They asked them.
Is this your son? Was he born blind?
His parents replied,
we now know this is our son and that he was born blind, but we don't know how he can see or who healed him. Ask him. He is old enough to speak for himself.
his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who had announced that anyone saying Jesus was the Messiah would be expelled from the synagogue. That's why they said.
He is old enough. Ask him.
So for the second time, they called in the man who had been blind and told him,
God should get glory for this, because we know this man Jesus is a sinner.
I don't know whether he is a sinner, but I know this. I was blind, and now I can see.
But what did he do? How did he heal you?
Look, I told you once, didn't you listen? Why do you want to hear it again? Or maybe you want to become one of his disciples too.
Then they cursed him and said,
You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know God spoke to Moses, but we don't even know where this man comes from.
Well, that's very strange. He healed my eyes, and yet you don't know where he comes from? We know that God doesn't listen to sinners, that he is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Ever since the world began, no one has been able to open the eyes of someone born blind. So if this man weren't from God, he couldn't have done this.
You were born a total sinner. Are you trying to teach us?
and they threw him out of the synagogue. When Jesus heard what had happened, he found the man and asked,
Do you believe in the Son of Man?
Who is he, sir? I want to believe in him.
You have seen him as he is speaking to you.
Yes, Lord, I believe.
and he worshipped Jesus.
I entered this world to render judgment, to give sight to the blind, and to show those who think they see that they are blind.
Some Pharisees who were standing nearby heard him and asked,
Are you saying we're blind?
If you were blind, you wouldn't be guilty, but you remain guilty because you claim you can see.
And now we'll proceed with the diminishing of the light. light ceremony.
This story that was just presented to you in the Reader's Theater has a lot of characters, but it revolves around two so-called sinners. A man because he was born blind, so clearly God was judging him and so caused him to be blind. It was a sure sign of God's judgment according to the religious beliefs and what the religious leaders taught. And then there was that sinner Jesus who actually broke one of the Ten Commandments by healing on the Sabbath. So it's these two troublemakers, these two sinners that are central in our story. So the man was healed by Jesus, and something powerful happened to him. He had no clue how it worked, how he was healed, why he was chosen to be healed. He didn't know who this man was who smeared mud on his eyes and then told him to go and wash in the pool of Siloam. But suddenly all the people who were around him, the crowd, the neighbors, maybe his parents, the Pharisees, they started bombarding him with questions. How were your eyes opened? Where is the man who did it? How did he do it? What did he do to you? What do you say about him? Nobody said, praise God, you've been healed. Nobody said, what is it like for you to have your sight? Nobody said, does the light hurt your eyes? It was just how and what and who and where. They thought that he was mixed up in something bad, that this had happened, that he had been healed. And his answers to their questions are first pretty timid. I don't know, I'm the man, yeah, I'm the blind man. He put some mud on my eyes and I washed and now I can see. But as the questions kept coming at him, and I can relate to this, I think he just started feeling stronger, maybe feeling a little irritated, and he finally answered the Pharisees very sharply. So sharply that they actually threw him out of the congregation. He said to them, isn't it astonishing that this man who healed my blindness, that you don't know who he is or where he came from? He must be of God. Why don't you know that? If he wasn't from God, he couldn't have done this. And why don't you religious leaders know this? In other words, it's like the blind man is saying, you think I'm blind? You can't see what's going on in front of you? Now, I can imagine the whole crowd going, what did he just say to them? This man who had been blind until about 45 minutes before has just told the admin board that they could not see God if God was right there in front of them. If God had bit them on the nose, they wouldn't even recognize God. And so they rise up in their indignation and say, who are you to tell us? Who are you to teach us what you know? So they kicked him out. I'm I'm sure his parents and his neighbors were quite taken aback. The scriptures say his parents kind of backed up, and they didn't want to have any part of it, as Becky read. Well, ask him. He's old enough. Let him answer the questions. And at that point, Jesus comes back. And the blind man doesn't recognize him because he didn't see who healed him. But he comes back and he asks the man who can now see, "Do you believe in me? Do you believe that I am of God?" And the man asks him, "Well, who are you? Who is the Son of Man? Tell me so that I may believe in him." And Jesus says, "You don't recognize me, but I'm the one standing right in front of you. I am the one who healed you, and yes, I am of God." And then you've had those epiphany moments where everything comes together, and you have this aha moment, and my hunch is that he recognized Jesus' voice as the one who had healed him, and then he put together that from all the questions he'd been bombarded with earlier, that when Jesus said, "Do you believe in me? Do you believe I am from God?" Those questions were so different from the aggressive questions that he'd been asked. And he put it all together, and he had been blind, and he could see, and now he could see even more clearly. He could see who this Jesus person was. He knew who was responsible for his healing, and he worshiped Jesus right then. So, who are we in this story? Are we the man born blind who needs to be able to have our blindness healed? That's who I like to be. That's who I imagine I am in the story. But the problem is that I also have to look at, well, who are the Pharisees, and am I possibly one of them? It's helpful to know that for John, the Pharisees were like a board of examining religious leaders. They were religious authorities, and they were devoted to ritual purity and to the keeping of the law. And for them, they truly believed they were the keepers of the faith, of the Jewish faith. And so by extension, if they were the keepers of the faith, they could also prosecute those who they thought were not keeping the faith according to their standards. And I think John, in this story, is telling us that, the people we need to watch out for, the people who we might be if we're not paying attention, we may be the Pharisees, we may be the people who think we can see and think we know everything that's the way it's supposed to be, and are not shy about telling you what you're doing wrong and what you need to do differently. Maybe we're those people who think we know it all, but we don't. And not because we're mean, but because we love God and we're trying to watch out for those that we care about. The Pharisees in this story, I think, genuinely wanted to protect people from believing the wrong things, like believing that this Jesus person was the Son of God. So they thought they were protecting the blind man and the people that were around from the power of darkness. They were saying, if something is not of God, I'm going to be here to protect you and to let you know, don't believe that. Like, this man, Jesus, he can't be of God. Don't fall for that. Don't believe that. But it seems like for the man in the story who now can see, there's something worse than wrong belief. And that is, and see if I can say this clearly, what is worse than wrong belief is wrong disbelief. What if something is of God and I don't believe it? What if something is of God and I'm not seeing it and I don't believe it? That is the question that the Pharisees forgot to ask. They were so sure of everything. I know I feel that way sometimes. I know that I gave Julie the bulletin elements in that email on Sunday night, and I felt so proud that I got her the bulletin elements early, only I didn't send them to her. I left her name off that email. And so Wednesday, she says, are you going to get me the bulletin elements? And I did. I sent them to you. No, you didn't. Those of us who are so sure of everything, those Pharisees who were so sure that God does not work on the Sabbath, that Moses is the only one who can speak for God, that anyone born blind is a sinner, and the same for anyone who healed on the Sabbath or broke the Sabbath, that God doesn't work through sinners, come on. That God does not work on us sinners, come on. God's not going to work on us. And nobody can teach us anything. And meanwhile, the man who was born blind, who was not sure of anything, is the only one who eventually saw the light. He was the only one who got it. If Jesus was a sinner, a heretic, a blasphemer, because he healed him, then he wanted to be a sinner too. That was all right with him, because he could now see. What if it's not God, and I believe it? What if it is God, and I don't believe it? I don't know which question the blind man may have asked himself when Jesus put the mud on his eyes. Am I supposed to believe that this is of God? Or is it not of God? But I know what he said afterward, and that's what I'm trying to pay attention to. He said out loud to the Pharisees, I don't know if this person, Jesus, is a sinner. I don't know if he's a troublemaker. All I know is that I couldn't see before, and now I can see. So I pray that our hearts and minds and spirits will be open to see those places where we think we know everything, and maybe we don't. And that wherever we are not seeing things clearly, or believe that we know it all, that we will be open to God moving in us, to helping us to see what we need to see, and helping us to get over ourselves. Amen.